Good afternoon, everyone. And I know the day 2, just after lunch, just before tea, but still, thank you for sticking around. Thank you for not sleeping so far. I know it was a set of wonderful session, but again, lot of sessions, lot of information. But thanks again for joining today. So this is Sanjith. I head the commercial partner ecosystem for MOSIP, and we have a wonderful set of panelists today discussing about the new modalities or emerging modalities in the world of biometrics. So we are a little short of time. We are running behind our schedule. So without taking a lot of time, I would let the panelists give a very quick introduction about their field of work and then what are they going to represent in today's session. Yeah, Ted, why don't you?
Thanks, Sanjith. I'm Ted Dunstone. I'm the CEO of an organization called BixeLab, which does biometric testing and assurance. And we see a range of emerging technologies that come through our labs from time to time. Probably the one of most relevance here will be contactless fingerprint capture. But in terms of other technologies, we also see Voiz. This is something which is not used in national ID projects very much yet, but I think it's certainly something that is an emerging field in that area.
Vivek.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Sanjay. I'm Vivek, Director of Technology for a deep tech called Kaizen Secure Voiz. We are a Voiz Biometrics deep tech company working in the field of providing higher layer of assurances with Voiz as a biometric tool.
Hi, my name is Ameya Bhagwat. I head the global sales for Tech5, a Swiss-based company. While we specialize in biometric back-end large-scale ABIS solutions, we are also innovating on contactless fingerprint solutions, and that will be the topic of discussion.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Sachin Ratta. I head the sales of Armatura Global Solutions. We are into new technology, that is palm vein recognition technology, which is again a contactless technology, and we'll be discussing about the benefits of this technology.
Hello, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Antony Vendhan. I'm co-founder of Identy. So we focus on mobile touchless biometrics. Everything is mobile, everything is remote. Our whole belief is mobile biometrics is the best way to ensure user identity. We enable the ecosystem to enroll and verify using mobile phone. So that is the belief behind Identy. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. So I think we will keep this session a little, little basic, because there are a lot of questions. We have been deep diving into a lot of topics here, but again, we keep hearing about a lot of technology aspects as well. So maybe first question to the panel, probably it's for you, Ameya, or maybe Antony. What do you mean by a contactless fingerprinting? Can you give a little bit of overview on that?
Sure, Sanjit. So I think all of us are aware that so far fingerprint has been captured through contact-based devices where you put your hand or fingers on a device and you press against it. However, the trend has been changing since the last 5 to 6 years, where we see that increasingly mobile devices with the back camera can be used to capture fingerprints. So all you need to do is point your camera at the fingerprints and get a good image that can then be used to perform either an authentication transaction or an enrollment transaction.
And do you have any dependencies on the type of camera, for example? Like it's a contactless and you'll be using a camera. So how about a feature phone or a smartphone? So what is the dependency on the camera?
So there is definitely a dependency on the camera. However, from our perspective, we continuously invest into R&D. So as of today, what we have already achieved is you can take any off-the-shelf mobile phone, could be an Android or an iOS. Recommended is about an 8 megapixel resolution of the camera, and all we need is a autofocus and a flash to capture a really good quality fingerprint image.
Thanks, Ameya. So Sachin, just one question for you. So we have been hearing about palm print and palm vein, right? So you are specialist in palm vein. Do you really see palm vein? I mean, or you just see palm print?
So we actually do both. If somebody doesn't want to use our devices, hardware devices, we have a solution which can be used with a mobile device also. So if you are using a mobile device, it will always be a palm print. But if you are using our devices which has near infrared lights, which capture your vein patterns. So when our devices get activated, it throws NIR, and the vein which is beneath our skin, the hemoglobin which is running in the veins, it does not reflect the IR back. So it becomes dark, and the rest of the palm is lighted. So you can easily capture the entire vein patterns.
Wow. And then how unique is that? I mean, you have fingerprint, you have iris, you have voice, and many other technology. How unique is a palm vein?
So there are a lot of studies that have happened in the past, direct about which is the most unique and which is the most secure or convenient biometrics. So most secure, definitely the DNA. And after that, if you are talking about the parameter on convenience and secure, it is the palm vein patterns.
Okay.
So the studies are being done by our renowned biometrics stalwart, Dr. Anil Jain also.
Okay, thanks, Sachin. And Antony, I'm going back to the contactless fingerprinting topic, and I think you are the one who introduced the word CRADA to me, and you're also doing a lot of interoperability analysis with respect to the flat fingerprint versus the systems that are trained on 2D images. So can you give a little bit of overview of what is that? What do you mean by the interoperability when it comes to 3D and 2D fingerprints?
Sure. Thanks, Sanjith. So, typically when you touch the fingerprint scanner, you always get a 2D image, right? Because that's how it is. But when you use the mobile phone camera, it's a 3D. And then basically because, use the mobile phone camera, then you kind of flatten that, your 3D into like a 2D image, right?
So is it true that that's the toughest part when you are doing a capture using fingerprint? Like, capturing the 3D image and then flattening it out to 2D. Is that the toughest part when it comes to technology?
Actually, that is the easiest part. The toughest part is liveness reduction.
Okay.
I think that's, if you ask me, that is the toughest part. Flattening is not it's kind of easiest part actually. But yeah, like you said, what NIST has done, they did a research in a report called 8315, which came out a few years back. So according to NIST, again, for the civilian verification, when you use multiple fingerprints, mobile fingerprints are ready. But the thing is, who is going to build the cat kind of stuff, right? Because no country is doing it. So it's going to take a while. But I think from the technology perspective, if you don't involve criminal justice, mobile fingerprints are ready for civilian verification. Especially use when the request is use more than one finger. That's what NIST says. But again, I think countries should take, can it really solve the problem, right?
Yeah.
If we really solve the problem, then I think, they should consider run a pilot just like any other thing, and they can make a decision.
And I could read about NIST conducting studies on the interoperability. And how is the recent results? Is that looking promising? Are we there yet? Can you give some? Or are you there? Yeah.
Again, it is very relative, right? I think NIST used to perform a lot of these tests for the Western world, right? And the Western world doesn't believe in biometrics anymore for various reasons. I think we are focusing biometrics for the emerging world. I would say, either MOSIP or the countries can make the decision actually of, how the systems are going to work for them. This is the future, right? So we evolved from ink-based to touch-based. Why not touchless?
Thanks, Antony. So I'm going to Vivek now. So Vivek represents Voiz Biometrics. So when it comes to capturing, let's say, a fingerprint or iris or a palm vein, we are actually taking an image, right? That's my understanding. In terms of Voiz Biometrics, you are not looking at a thing; it's something else. So can you enlighten us, what do you really capture? What is that? What do you mean by Voiz Biometrics?
Sure. Let me start off by saying, in a human being, there are multiple unique identifiers. So it can start with earlobe, it can be your iris, it can be your face, it can be a finger, it can be a palm, or it can be a DNA. One biometric which is been left over, underlooked, is voice. Voice is a product of two glands in your body, one is your phylogenical gland, which is basically the gland which is responsible for pitch, throat, tone, cadence, breathlessness, pause, break, and your nasal tract, which is basically for modulating your voice to provide a meaningful sentence. So now I'm speaking in English. This modulation happens through your nasal tract. The throat and other things happen through your phylogenical gland. Now, if you capture this voice, like in any other form of biometric, you have a certain, like in a speech spectrograph, if you remove, you will see that there are waves which come out of your voice. Now, these contain embedded features of your voice, which is unique like a DNA.
I have a cold, so what will happen?
Absolutely. So, it's a brilliant question. So, now ENT related problems affect, say, partly around 2% of the extracted data. The 80% of the extracted data is based on your phylogenical gland. Hence, if you have a cold or a cough, instead of your likelihood ratio, what we call it, there is no absolute value here. We are calling it as a likelihood ratio. The unknown person coming in could be Mr. Ted or Vivek or Sanjith, is 50% or 55 absolute value. It might be 1 point or half a point lesser. This is in theory what happens.
Understood.
So the interesting part of voice is, I'm sure when you call from any mobile phone or any landline phone to your home, right, you don't have to introduce yourselves. That's
Okay.
that's an embedded biometric engine which is there in the human brain.
Yeah.
So we are trying to mimic that at a software
Amazing,
level.
amazing.
So initially what happened was there are several theories
Yeah.
which the probabilistic linear discriminatory analysis works. So you have taken one theory and improved upon the theory, and the better the extraction principle, more the extraction features in lesser period of time will give you customer experience and take away this myth of biometric takes a lot of time, costlier to operate, etc., comes down. The second important part why we decided to focus on voice was the fact that it is device agnostic. Today you can use a 800 rupee black Nokia phone and still do a voice biometric authentication in the rural part of any country in the world using their own natural language, rather than the entry barrier into any of these forms of biometrics are the text. Close to 100% of the population of any country can read or speak their native language as against English.
Okay. So I'll come to Ted now. Thanks, Vivek. So Ted, you are running one of the biometric labs, one of the 2 NIST accredited biometric labs. And then, I'm pretty sure you need to be equipped when there are new biometric modalities are coming in. The traditional fingerprint, iris and face, I'm sure that's already covered. But then how do you really approach when someone says, yeah, I need to test voice biometric, I need to test palm vein, or I need to test a contactless? What's your approach towards new technologies when it's testing?
Yeah, so there are two aspects. There are really 3 aspects to testing. One involves the accuracy, which is what we've just been talking about now. One involves vulnerability, so how easy is it for somebody to fake the biometric, and the other is how easy is it to get a quality sample. And so no matter what biometric, whether it is a common biometric or whether it is an emerging biometric, it's always really important to make sure that you get a representative sample from the population using the modality. And so in some senses, whether you're using an emerging modality or whether you're using a traditional modality, the processes underlying that testing are the same. What is different, however, is if we are looking at issues to do with either quality or to do with vulnerability, but interestingly less to do with accuracy, then it's important to understand what sorts of things are going to be important. And that requires more understanding of the technology, it requires experienced engineers at our end. And for those countries that are thinking about adopting any biometric technology, it requires making sure that you have understood what those trade-offs are likely to be in terms of accuracy, quality, and vulnerability.
Thank you, Ted. So probably we'll also see some of the challenges. I mean, maybe I'm still trying to understand a bit more. This is again on the contactless side of the story. So liveness, I think Ted was talking about liveness or presentation attack detection as one of the key area to be handled And this is my understanding, I may be wrong. When it comes to fingerprint sensors where you touch a sensor, if the sensor is capable of identifying whether it's a real fingerprint or not, you are covered. But then this, I feel, is a challenge in terms of a contactless fingerprint, right? So I would probably ask first, Antony, what's your opinion on that? How do you really handle a presentation attack detection?
Actually, Sanjay, I would rephrase the question. Mobile offers better liveness detection actually than commodity hardware scanner. I'm sorry, because the cost-effective scanners don't offer any liveness detection. That is typically deployed in the market for enrollment. Like very expensive devices are used, they have a very good liveness detection. But normally, when we see the devices for authentication, those devices don't have any liveness detection. I mean, even recently, like, in India, there was a case in, one of the state where, they were just spoofing the system, right? And the API transaction. But on the mobile, it is very, very secure. I mean, compared to the fingerprint scanner, because it's never secure, because someone is trying to break the system. But with touchless fingerprints, the latest technologies offer, all the providers offer very good, liveness detection, right? And I think that is going to be the challenge for all the fingerprint providers, either touch or touchless. How are you going to stay ahead of the game, especially with the latest synthetic attacks which are going to come?
Yeah.
AI is going to create a lot of problems. But I mean, if you really ask me, I think that is a challenge for us. I think that's where we are focusing. Maybe Ameya can add more.
Yeah, Ameya, would you like to add? I think that's a very interesting point. My understanding was completely wrong. I was thinking the touch fingerprint versus touchless, there is a big gap with respect to identifying a spoof. So it looks like that's not the case. So
yeah, so again, right, looking at the history of fingerprint sensing, it started with optical scanners, and I think it still continues to be the dominant technology in the market. Obviously, there are new technologies like capacitive and active thermal that have entered the market. At the end of the day, right, when we talk about liveness detection on the fingerprints, you're not actually presenting it, right, like you do on a phone. The term presentation attack detection really came from facial biometrics because you're presenting and capturing something. On the fingerprint scanner, you touch it, and it's basically the software that does the job, right? If there are a few devices out there that have an inbuilt capability, but at the end of the day, it's a piece of software that detects it. What we have done, right, and I concur with Antony, right? What we have done is we have said, if it's a piece of software, you could run it on the mobile phone. Why do you need it to be a device-dependent software, right? So that's, I think, at the end of the day, right, what we are saying is when we claim that we have presentation attack detection, say spoofing, anti-spoofing feature, we are saying don't believe us, right? Go to the labs. Look at what they are doing, because we would be submitting, just like NIST evaluates the algorithms, we submit our algorithms to the lab so that they test it, they certify it. And at the end of the day, right, it's like any other software out there. The hackers will always try to find ways and means of creating a fraud or hacking the system. We as the industry have to be ahead of the times, right? And then that's what brings it all together.
Yeah, so thanks, Ameya. I'll ask a question to Ted related to that. So, Ted, I think NIST is usually, publishing out various mechanisms. How do you really assess a technology, or how do you really assess quality of biometrics, right? So, especially on the contactless fingerprinting, what is that happening on the assessment side and standardization side? Can you enlighten us on that?
Yeah, well, there is a lot of interest, and as we've just heard, NIST has done some preliminary work in this area. I think really there's a question mark over. I think this work needs to keep going. Basically, it's still quite preliminary. The proof of the pudding is when we see large scale deployments, and there are some large scale deployments which are kind of starting to happen now. And once we have data that starts to come in from those, we will have a better sense. What I was going to say is one of the things which is interesting about fingerprint and vein technology from a vulnerability perspective is that the effort that somebody has to go to acquire those in the first place is relatively high compared to face or some of the other modalities where you might be able to go online and find a YouTube video or something. And so the types of fraud that are going to happen are potentially different you're more likely to get sort of essentially insider fraud, where there's somebody assisting somebody else to do that, and that in itself changes the risk profile. So I guess what am I saying? For emerging technologies, risk profiles are different from what you might imagine the risk profiles are if you are familiar with face or iris or some of the other technologies.
Thanks, Ted. I think that's very interesting. So, I'm kind of shuffling, I know, because we are representing a lot of technologies here. This is a question to Sachin. So I was, again, reading about the technology, a little bit, right? As I said, I'm just reading it. Palm vein. So you said it's the vein under the skin that is what you are scanning. And, depending on whether it's a cold environment or a hot environment, etc., the depth of your vein, do you have any impact on the depth and the capture accuracy?
So there is, Sanjith, there is no as such data availability, but the depth of the skin is usually varies from 0.8 mm to 1.4 mm.
Okay.
And within this range, I have not encountered any issue that IR is not able to capture the vein patterns. So, of course, skin depth is not an issue at all.
Okay. Thanks, Sachin. So one question back to Vivek. So I was reading an article last week. A.R. Rahman, the Oscar-winning music director, he was able to create a song with a late person's voice, right? And he claimed he got 70%. It's not biometric accuracy what he meant, but in the ear of a musician, he said, yeah, it's close to 70% of the original voice. So, Vivek, I think this is something that I would like to understand a little more. Like, how do you really, and my friend, right, he can mimic at least 5 people convincingly. How do you really address it?
Okay. I'll break the answer into 2 parts, the short one and the long one. The short answer is, when you have a mimicry artist or an artificial intelligence based tool creating a clone of your voice, they look at top 3 features within the 24 audible frequencies which humans are able to hear. So it is limited to 2 or 3 features which is repeated over a period of time to create that effect. And the prosody of speech is adjusted. That's why you see more songs rather than a full detailed speech of a person.
Yeah.
1. 2 is the artificial intelligence based systems generated fakes. When you run it through a very progressive system like ours, we can extract more number of features from the original voice and compare them against the fake which is being presented to us for authentication. So when you do that, it at best passes say 2 to 3 features. So it is easily addressable. So as I was talking to you yesterday, the vampire and the mosquitoes both drink blood.
Yeah.
The perceived threat is a vampire. The imminent threat is a mosquito. In today's condition, I think we should address the imminent threats and move towards a robustness of a system. And while addressing this, we see a plethora of biometric identities which are available. No single biometric identity is strong enough to protect the ecosystem. So the longer part of the answer is your AI-based theories are divided. The world is divided. We have 4 theories in total. Adaptive theory, progressive theory, generative theory, and a predictive theory. So these are all theories. These are statistical and mathematical computational theories which are built to provide a probabilistic linear discriminatory analysis, and so that your detection error, there is a standard, you are deviating from that standard, and there is a percentage of deviation is 2%, 3%, okay, chalta, we can leave it off. But if the detection error is more, is when you extract more features. In retrospective effort, if you, as during the earlier panel, there was one panelist who was saying that all depends on the enrollment. Yes. 3 years back, when we reached out to NIST and said, okay, why don't we evaluate our platform? They introduced us to TED Biometrics. So NIST operates through NVLAP. NIST does not certify. It is a standards organization. So they give out standards and they leave it to
Labs
companies like
Yeah.
labs like Biometrics to do all the tests according to the ISO standards 19794-1, 2, 3 and 30. So these are standards which are very well laid out. So once we follow these standards and fall into an open source modular platform like MOSIP, you are making the extraction principle more robust, thereby reducing spoofs. Yes, spoofs will come in generative theories. They are limited in sections today. And the commercial part of it is restricting people. Why would somebody with a bank account balance of $5 be attacked with a $5,000 tool like
Makes
Wally?
sense. Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. So at a scale of a national ID, our imminent threats are different.
Yeah.
The perceived threats can be a vampire and so on.
So thanks, Vivek, for that. I'll come back to Ted. Again, I've seen the presentation attack detection kits from Ted. So it's a suitcase with a lot of artifacts, fake faces and things like that. But then when it comes to voice, or let's say when it comes to a palm or a contactless fingerprinting, right? How do you really make sure that you're getting the right artifacts generated to be tested against a PID? I know this topic, I'm staying on the topic because this is very relevant. So Ted, can you please enlighten that?
Yeah. So the first thing we do is understand the technology and think about the technology as an attacker would think about the technology. Because we have experts, we look at a range of different types of scenarios, and we're always very mindful of what is a plausible scenario. To the point that was just made, it's no point in setting out to test something which is going to be really expensive or time-consuming, because that's just not practical from an attack point of view. The other thing that we really are very keen to do is see what other people are doing, because there's a wealth of different information, even just on YouTube. You don't need to go to the dark web to find it, on how to attack these systems, even more obscure systems. So, we use our internal expertise, we use remote expertise, and we also work with the people that we're doing the testing for to make sure that, the people that we're doing the testing for really are keen to make sure that when we do the testing, it's reflective of the sorts of attacks that they think that they're going to encounter. So it's a collaborative effort from that perspective as well.
Thanks, Ted. So I think, there's a lot of topics that we can discuss here, because it's amazing technologies that we are able to see here, right? So probably I'll give a couple of minutes to the audience. Like, if you have any questions to this panel. So I can see Santosh is sitting here. He's doing a lot of research on the face bias and related topic, and many other faces who are working on the biometric space. Do you have any questions to this panel? Yeah. So.
Yeah, sure.
Biometrics. So, I mean, in statistics, you say that, if you go do a medical test, of course, you have a chance of getting false positives. But if you get a positive result from 2 independent labs, then that is a lot more significant, or as much smaller rate. So similarly, have any of you actually worked on that, right? Maybe a combination of face plus voice, maybe convenient, but at the same time extremely accurate, balancing some of the negative or limitations of each other. So my question is, in general, is there a good combination of multimodal from your experience that works best?
Yeah, so in fact, right, multimodal biometrics has been almost, I think, 12, 15 years back, right? So when Aadhaar went ahead and they launched the program, initially I remember we were involved in it, and they were planning to go only with fingerprints. So imagine for 1.4 billion people who are enrolled with fingerprints, it would have been a chaos. And that's when they consulted the industry. That's when even iris was added into it. So, and I think iris is still the most accurate, right, amongst all the modalities. So I think multimodal biometrics definitely solves the problem. What we are seeing as a trend in the market is, while we still see a reliance on fingerprint more as a deduplication mechanism, right, when you're talking about false positives and even in a one-to-one matching scenario, Combining it with either face, you can increase the accuracy. But I would suggest, right, if countries who are going ahead, since voice is coming up pretty fast, you may not use it for deduplication from a higher large database sizes, but you keep it enrolled so that you can use it in the authentication space while you use the core traditional fingerprint and iris to deduplicate, but have that option later on, right? So on the authentication side, you can drive more adoption.
Thanks, Ameya. So, yeah, I think we are also a little short of time. So there is one final question to all four of you, and then Ted, probably I'll come back to you for another question. So what if you have to name one area, one R&D area that will make sure that the technology is excellent for a very large scale adoption? When I say very large scale adoption, I'm talking about countries of 100, 200 million population. What would be that R&D area? Or do you claim that the technology is ready for them? So, yeah, I mean, it's a question for all four of you.
So good question, Sanjith, right? So from our perspective again, when we talk about contactless fingerprint, we are very confident that we can deploy it for a population of about 10 million or so if you capture all 10 fingerprints and as a single modality, right? You can even use it for enrollment. We have seen evidence of the image quality and stuff. However, as you start scaling up, go beyond say 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, you definitely need to combine it with additional modality. Up to say a 50 million or so, combining it with face and using even face for dedupe is a good strategy. Obviously, it all depends on the quality of face capture, right? But there are, I think, enough good technologies out there. But for going up to 100, 200 million, I would still say for the time being, reliance would be on the more traditional methods of capture and then enabling the ecosystem later on.
Sachin, you want to?
You actually touched the pain point. So with the palm vein recognition technology, the best and the worst part is, one is for sure it is more accurate than any other technologies that is available. But the second part is, since the database is not available with us, to train the algorithm to match on a higher capacity, maybe in the millions of records which Ameya is talking about, that is the main point. With face, we have the database available. With fingerprints, it's been ages, we have the iris available also for the deduplication. But with the palm, we are still struggling how to capture all the data and train our algorithm to reach to millions of levels. But otherwise, I think he's right. We should always go with multi-modal biometrics. Definitely one should be the face, which is most fast. And if it is with palm or any other touchless biometric, maybe could be a fingerprint, could be a voice biometric, could be a palm vein. That is the best because you are doing with a completely touchless. The best part with palm vein patterns is, for us, the enrollment and the authentication both can happen with a single device. I don't need to have a separate device for the enrollment and a separate device for the authentication.
Thanks, Sachin. Vivek?
Yeah. For the short answer is yes, voice biometric is ready for prime time. While we work, just touching back on the earlier question about multimodal biometrics, complementary multimodal biometrics is what is required to address such a large corpus of 100 million, 200 million kind of samples. So if we rely on non-complementary patterns, so it increases the bill of material. So this is a practical challenge for everybody. Now, if you take voice biometric and face, say I only vectorize the part where there is a lip movement happening, and say I'm saying Mera Bharat Mahan Hai Is Desh Ka Vasi Hun, I can capture the voice and the vectors which are relevant to the movement of that in multiple languages, including Swahili if required, and post that into areas and extract the principles to also operate as a anti-spoofing or a liveliness detection measure. It is more easier. This 100 million to 1.4 billion can be scaled faster. That is one. The second part is, for a large corpus of 1.4 billion, I would touch upon a simple sample. If you are buying a battery of 10,000 batteries in a lot, you would sample the rate at 1%, 2% and do 100 tests. So when there is a sample size of 1.4 billion, 100 million and above, this is where we work on the equal error rates for those kind of a sample. So when you enlarge your sample base, which is available to you on open source, we touch on a new threat area, which is what is defined on OWASP top 10 for LLMs.
Yeah.
So some of them, like Alan Turing Institute points out very clearly, there is a lot of bias in those kind of large corpuses, and the models build them. So just by relying on open source samples or collected samples to target that large database may not be practically possible. So we have to segment the base and see what is working. And of course, end of the day, it all falls under customer life cycle.
Yeah.
Acquisition, interaction
sense.
management, and retention. So the best formula would be to adapt a multimodal complementary biometric technology, as we mentioned very clearly, for those areas considering costs.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Thanks, Vivek. Antony, over to you.
See, I'm a technology guy, right? The technology was ready yesterday, but the perception is very different, right? So I think it is going to take a while until the perception changes, right? Like I said, we moved from ink-based to touch-based fingerprint. I think we will go to touchless one day. But if you ask me, is the technology ready? Technology is ready.
Yeah.
And because we are collecting, because 2 is always better than 1, right? Because you are collecting like 10 fingerprints. I mean, our recommendation is, if you capture more than 1 finger, it is good enough. But again, when that is going to happen, we don't know. But if you really ask me, I would say it's can we identify the person with minimal biometric? That is basically the goal, right? Because then that is privacy protection, regardless, right? Eventually, hopefully, we'll get there. But I think all technologies are ready.
Thanks, Antony. I think that's very interesting, right? We moved from ink-based fingerprint to our current fingerprinting. So I think, that's a wonderful thought. I never thought like that. Oh yeah, please.
Fingerprints seem like they stand the test of time, right? I can get my fingerprints taken when I'm 10 years old. Hopefully it'll still work when I'm 80. But with all of the different technologies that you've spoken, can you comment on their robustness to last a lifetime?
Santosh, I think this is very apt question. Even in Aadhaar says you should go for the enrollment up once you reach 5, then again you reach 15, and maybe after 5 or 10 years, Aadhaar says you should go for fingerprints because of your fingerprints. That you are living in an environment where it has a dust. Maybe the fingerprint gets rough, and for the child biometric, it gets more difficult and difficult. Again, I am quoting Dr. Anil Jain's report. He has done a pilot, I think a year back in Agra, with 20,000 children, collecting only their palm prints. And the results were phenomenal. I have the reports I can share with Sanjith also. Secondly, there are numerous reports on the internet also available that your vein patterns is throughout your life will remain the same. Only the length of the vein gets increased. Otherwise, the pattern remains the same throughout your life. You need not to go for the re-enrollment of your vein patterns again and again.
Thanks, Sachin. So probably in the interest of time, I'll request Ted, because he's the most neutral person here, doesn't represent a particular technology. So the question is, Ted, we have talked about Voiz, we have talked about palm, and we have talked about fingerprinting, contactless fingerprinting. So what are the other modalities that we need to really watch out for, especially on a foundational ID setup?
In terms of emerging modalities, that really does a good job of capturing the main sorts of technologies. But a lot of, if you're looking at the authentication side, certainly in the financial services, they use behavioral biometrics. So that is how the device is being used as a way of anchoring identity as well, or at least adding another barrier. So that's probably one of the other emerging. I mean, there are obviously there's gate. In the future, DNA will probably play part of a role because the rapid DNA sequencing is increasing. That will open a whole Pandora's box of other ethical issues. But I do think that the technology which is inside mobile phones is increasing in all kinds of ways. And I suspect that there will be other types of biometrics that can be collected that we're not thinking of now, just because cameras are getting better. If you look at the iPhone can take a 3D image, so you can use 3D geometry. So there's all sorts of other mechanisms that I think we will see. One thing I would say about the conversation we just had before, one of the challenges with any really large scale system is managing those outlier cases. So people who have got particular types of diseases, people who are elderly, and often those sort of use cases it's hard to find those use cases until you actually are doing a really large scale deployment. So that's just something to be mindful of as you deploy these new technologies.
Thank you, Ted. And before I conclude this session, all of them, they all have their technology demonstrated in the expo area today. So Ted has got the testing kits, including the PAD presentation at detection. How he actually tests those aspects is demonstrated. Vivek has got a demonstration on voice biometrics, enrollment and verification in an OEC environment. I think that's a practical example. Ameya has got again a contactless fingerprinting among other solutions that are demonstrated. Sachin has got a small device which captures the palm vein and how you can So then again, Antony has got a mobile phone full end-to-end enrollment that is done on MOSIP. That demonstration is available. If you are really keen to understand a little more on the technology, don't come to me. I'm not an expert. You need to go to these people. So once again, thank you so much for joining today. It was wonderful talking to you. And thank you for joining us in the tea time again. Thank you once again.
Thank you.